Ashton Forbes has been interested in the MH370 flight mystery and is also a researcher into exotic technologies and plasma physics. He's been studying a leaked video showing plasma orbs creating a portal for disappearing a plane. He recently received a mysterious letter asserting the authenticity of the video showing the plane being portaled somewhere else.
You are listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla, your source for the uncensored truth regarding the human, extraterrestrial, global, and political agenda. Click the like button and subscribe to this channel. And now, here's Dr. Michael Salla.
Welcome, Ashton, to Exopolitics Today.
Hey, thank you, Dr. Michael Salla. Appreciate it. Happy to be here and happy to talk with your audience today.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of people in my audience that probably don't know very much about the whole MH370 flight mystery. So we're going to kind of start from scratch. So first of all, why don't you just kind of tell us about your background and what got you interested in this MH370 mystery?
Well, I'm just a normal guy. I'm nobody special. So I've taken a different route on this whole UFO phenomenon. I got interested in it only after the Navy videos were declassified or, admitted to be real, I guess you could say, and kind of realized that UFOs might be real, started looking into it a little bit. And I have a healthcare IT background for my normal job. And I saw those videos, the MH370 videos reemerge August 2023 on social media on Reddit. And a lot of people and many of your audience probably think the videos are fake and what have you. But I decided to look into the plane and figure out what actually happened with this plane, because it's still been missing for 10 years. At least last year it had been. Now we're approaching 11 years. And what I learned when I researched the plane was there really was a cover-up. Clearly there's a cover-up related to this plane. Planes don't just disappear in 2014. They don't just disappear, especially not on 8-hour flights. So this has been, in the last year and a half, an incredible journey for me as I've become somebody in the UFO community, I guess, from researching these videos. And the thing I want to start this interview off with saying is that those videos they represent something beyond what I think anybody was really prepared for. But that's what I think the people in the UFO phenomenon should be ready for, is that there's not going to be some happy ending to this phenomenon. Is there's going to be some dark resolution, dark answer that we're probably not prepared for. And that's why I think that what we see in those videos, as hard as it is to believe, potentially we're looking at our future. So that's why I'm interested in this.
Okay, so why don't you just kind of walk us through what happened on March 12, 2014 with MH370 and the strange flight behavior that was recorded and tracked.
Yeah, so I'll try to abbreviate it. But so it was March 8th, 2014. And this plane is flying from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing. You can see it kind of flying northeast there on that flight track. And 40 minutes in, which is relatively quick, it's pretty soon after you hit cruising altitude, plane goes dark. And then it's only admitted a few days later, after they were searching in the South China Sea, that, oh, haha, just kidding, the plane turned around and went west. And the whole world's wondering, wait, what? The plane went west? Okay, so everyone's thinking, was it hijacked? Was it, what was happening here? Because this is already pretty sophisticated. How can you even make a plane go dark? That still isn't a question that has ever really been answered. It's a very basic question. It should be number one question. How does a plane go dark? How do you make a plane invisible from radar? Someone just, anyone in the audience want to explain that, go for it. So the plane turns around. It goes towards Penang, the closest airport that you could land a Boeing 777. It flies very low, we know, because the co-pilot's cell phone pings the cell tower when it flies over the airport. And then it actually, this graph isn't exactly correct, but it turns to the northwest. And we know because there was Malaysian military radar. So it flies up through that little ocean area there to the northwest towards the Nicobar Islands. And then this is where they lose contact with it. Roughly 1.5 to 2 hours into the flight is where they have no radar or anything on it. But now the problem is that There's like at least 5 different radars from 3 different countries that are still in range when they lose contact with the plane. So we already know just from that somebody's lying. Somebody's lying. Where's the data? We got 3 different countries aren't talking about what they saw with this plane. So that's a very basic question people should be asking. And then the narrative that's formed based on Inmarsat pings, which is U.S. intelligence related, was that they had some pings, guys. We found some pings, and they indicate the plane took a sharp turn to the south, not indicated on this flight path here, but directly to the south, and flew down to the South Indian Ocean until it ran out of fuel, and then probably just crashed down there. Well, just yesterday, at the time of this recording, there was a major, there was a crash of a relatively small plane that looked almost like a missile hitting the ground. And that was a tiny plane compared to a Boeing 777. So if a Boeing 777 is going into the ocean, that is going to leave a massive debris field, which we never found. In fact, we've never found anything in the South Indian Ocean. There's never even been anyone who's corroborated the plane going down there at all. And some people say, well, they found some debris. And what I want to point out is the debris should have been found in the Western Australia based on this claim the plane went into the South Indian Ocean. How much debris did we find in anywhere in Australia? Anywhere at all? None. Not one piece. The debris that was found by random people, because it was so far away, it was in Africa. There's only like a few pieces that were connected to the plane. It's found in Africa. It's in the wrong location. So what I will tell you guys for the mystery here is either the debris is fake, planted, whatever you want to think, or the satellite pings are fake. One of the two is probably real, and one of the two is probably fake. Think of it from that perspective. So which do you choose? Do you take the satellite pings where we searched for 2 to 3 times and we found nothing over the course of 4 years of searching? Or do you take the debris, which we found in Africa, but it's in the wrong location, which will indicate the plane went somewhere else? So that's the mystery that we've been left with in the public. The prevailing narrative has been, it's actually not, it wasn't a prevailing narrative when it started. It was actually the least likely narrative was that it was pilot suicide. And that was actually deemed a conspiracy theory. But now that narrative is the one that all the YouTubers and what have you are running with. And I think it's pretty disgusting because there's actually zero evidence that the pilot did this. And there's actually evidence that it's impossible for the pilot to have done it, which is that the experts that actually, are pilots themselves that have looked at Boeing 777 indicate there's no way for one person to turn off all the power in the system in the plane in 64 seconds or 63 seconds, whatever it was that they had between the last communication and the plane going dark. So when people start speculating and making up fake stories about the pilot and his mental state and stuff like that, that's monstrous to me. So anyway, go ahead.
So one of the first people to discuss the mystery over the people who were on the passenger list for that MH370 was Dick Gregory, the famous comedian. and he zeroed in on 4 top scientists who had filed for patents that were part of a delegation of elite semiconductor scientists, and that they were working on a patent application that was potentially worth trillions of dollars, and it involved a very high-powered financial group. So we have the video of Dick Gregory talking about this. So let's play that, Chaz, and then I'll get Ashton to comment.
Where that was coming from, there's one of the most evil, vicious Navy bases in the history of the planet. They do stuff that would make Hitler look like Santa Claus. Garcia.
So
wait.
Sorry.
Diego Garcia. That's where that first Malaysian plane is. That's where it landed. It had 4 scientists on it. 20 scientists, but 4 had filed for patents. It was Malaysia, but they worked out of Austin, Texas for Texas Instrument. All right. And the ones behind that plane was Texas Instrument, the government, and Boeing, who made the plane.
So, Ashton, what do you think of Dick Gregory's testimony there?
Yeah, I'm really familiar with that video. Dick Gregory, funny guy. And the Diego Garcia part, actually MH370 put Diego Garcia on the map the same way Bob Lazar put Area 51 on the map, which is pretty funny because Diego Garcia might even be more secret and more crazy stuff going on than Area 51. It's in the perfect location to test secret stuff. There's nothing nearby whatsoever. It also happens to be the perfect location to hide a Boeing 777. In fact, it might be the only location on planet Earth that you can hide a Boeing 777. One thing I want people to understand is that planes don't crash without leaving debris fields. Phones don't ring if they're underwater or destroyed or what have you. And there's nowhere you can land a Boeing 777 at a commercial airport without people realizing it, a commercial airplane. So this really limits your options on where did this plane go. Because if it crashed, where was the debris field? We would have seen it from outer space the next day. And, you know, if it landed somewhere, where did it land? So Diego Garcia makes the most sense. It wasn't just Dick Gregory saying that. Marc Duguay, he's a famous French author, did an investigation. And then 3 months after the plane disappeared, he wrote up, probably went to Diego Garcia. And he was told by intelligence sources, stop looking into this, stop talking about this. That's where the plane ended up for sure. Now, as to the motive, this is actually, let's just call it a little bit of misinformation. Heart's in the right location. Turns out the semiconductor engineers are the motive, but it wasn't the 4 people that they talk about related to that patent about optimizing dyes on a wafer. We looked those people up. None of them are on the plane. But actually, there's something that you could argue is a little bit better. There's 20 engineers from this company on board the plane, and none of them are American, but they work for the American company Freescale Semiconductors, which is connected to U.S. aerospace and defense and had a 2005 NSA security report written about its microchips trying to achieve superconductive states. And superconductivity is one of these elements you need to potentially achieve second order effects like manipulating gravity. So you have 20 people. They were all sitting next to each other. 1 or 2 of them had their whole families with them, but they're going on like a business trip for a week to China. So 8 of them are Chinese nationals as well. So instead of this narrative of they had this patent and it's going to the Rothschilds or whatever people have been saying, that doesn't work because those people weren't on the plane. That's not how patents work either. The company gets the patent. It doesn't matter if the people die who are related to it. It's the company's patent to begin with. But it is interesting when you look at who was ownership of the company. I think it was BlackRock Group was part of one of the people who's ownership of the company. So there are big players involved in this company, and they are connected to U.S. aerospace and defense. And we've got 8 Chinese nationals on board the plane. So the narrative is what? Oh, they're defecting to China. They've got some knowledge, intellectual property. They might even have some microchips or something on board the plane. They had just come out with a microchip that was smaller than your fingernail, tiny than the head of your fingernail, dimple in a golf ball. So that would be the thing, that this would then be about espionage. And actually, when you think about it, although it seems hard to accept, it does make the most sense when you think about the obfuscation and the way the whole event of the plane played out. Nobody wanted to be forthcoming with information. Everybody's always saying, all the officials, well, wait for the investigation to conclude. Like, what do you mean wait for it to conclude? There's a plane missing. Maybe people on Gilligan's Island situation going on somewhere. What do you mean wait for the investigation to conclude? The United States playing dumb, big red flag. Huge red flag. Let me say this. There were 2 other better, like weird scenarios that happened. Not just the Dick Gregory scenario, but there's other things that more people should be talking about. One's the Mike Harris. He worked for Motorola as a consultant. I ended up doing an interview with him with another podcaster, and he straight up told me that Freescale broke off from Motorola. And even at the time when Motorola was connected to Freescale, they were trying to produce superconductor microchips, which goes to show they were working on advanced technology for sure. And in his interview with, I think it was Carrie Cassidy, he says, just randomly, like she doesn't even ask him. He says, can I tell you what I think happened to the plane? It went through an interdimensional portal and it'll be back again. It fell in a hole. And she kind of laughs and he's just looking at her serious. And I've asked him about this. He said, well, it was just the logical conclusion. Planes don't disappear. We had to have known where it is. So as crazy it is to believe, it must have gone through some kind of portal somewhere. And the other crazy thing that happened is just a few days after the plane disappeared, Joseph P. Farrell, maybe you've spoken to him before. He's written books and talks about plasma and pyramids, stuff like that. He was doing an interview, maybe also with Carrie Cassidy, or maybe with someone else, I can't remember, but he's sitting there saying that he heard rumors that the United States used a super weapon on the plane and that maybe they made it teleport. This is a few days after the plane disappeared. He's saying made it teleport, and maybe it was a show of force to China or Russia. But then he kind of discredits his own idea and says, well, if you're going to do that, wouldn't you just shoot a missile at the plane? You don't need to do some advanced super weapon on the plane. But if you want to do it as a show of force and you're the United States, then yeah. So end of the day, if you really look at all the evidence, you're going to find out the United States is easily the only culprit that could pull this off. And they're the only ones that could cover it up to the degree where they've got us going on a wild goose chase where it's obvious if you look at the evidence objectively that it's nonsense to think the plane went in the South Indian Ocean. And that the better narrative is that there was a fire on board the plane. It was probably part of the espionage that was happening here. Like these people were going to China and the United States knew about it. And they were like, nope, we're not going to let that happen. They caused a fire on the plane. All the witnesses saw fire and the plane flying low. Like the captain was trying to go land at the nearest airport, all that stuff. The fire probably incapacitated everyone and the crew and maybe even one of the pilots as well. So they're in an emergency scenario. And then this is the hardest narrative jump is, okay, you've got this plane on fire. Now enter the MH370 videos. We see a plane on fire in these videos, 2 videos, military videos from different angles. We can see a plane on fire. We can see it flying low. It looks like it's trying to land in the ocean. We've got coordinates that indicate the Nicobar Islands. It's the real location where the plane would be at the right time. And then we see some orbs just start circling it. And then all of this to that. Yeah, so I just want to say, I'm going to add it in here, is that, and then we zap it. So the narrative that forms is one of 2 options. Either the United States has some orbs or aliens have some orbs and someone was saving this plane, or this was an event where maybe they do have teleportation technology and that plane teleported somewhere, or it got annihilated and it got destroyed and maybe a couple pieces of it washed ashore in Africa. So those as crazy it is to believe, the story of those videos makes more sense than everything we've been told about the plane to date.
Okay, so that actually makes a lot of sense. That those early theories that was the Jacob Rothschilds or the Blackstone company wanted to get control over the patent for the superconductor microchip. That probably is inaccurate, and that more likely it's the US intel community that did not want these scientists who had achieved some kind of technological breakthrough taking that with them to China. So that does make sense.
It could be a combination too. And one other little factoid I want to throw in is that the company was like $7 billion in debt at the time as well. And those people that held all that debt were, and the creditors were these cases very powerful people as well, that all of a sudden when that company went under and they got bought out, all that debt just disappeared when the company got bought out too. So it's just a lot of sketchiness going with that company. So go ahead. Right.
So this takes me to a testimony of a secret space program whistleblower witness by the name of Mark Domizio. And it's a complicated story, but essentially what he's saying is that he was part of a kind of wet works team that killed a disassembly crew working on the rear portion of Flight 370 that had landed or had been taken to Diego Garcia. So I think we have a little video clip of that. I don't know if have you seen this Mark Domizio clip? Maybe
yeah. I've seen it, but I think I don't know. I get kind of confused. I think he was like remote viewer or something, right? Is that what he was?
Well, he said that that it was actually a clone of him that had a soul extract moved into it. I mean, it sounds far-fetched, But these are the kind of stories that a lot of these people who have been in the secret space programs have. And he says that he actually saw Flight 370 at Diego Garcia. So, yeah, what do you make of that?
What I'll say is this: there's a lot. Like the moment there's major credibility issues, I can't really run with it on word of mouth. I do try to base my opinion on all the evidence, at least all the hard evidence that's out there. But stories are interesting to hear in terms of guiding where the narrative and the story you think that makes the most sense comes from. So in some cases, these people are right in terms of, like, I do think the plane went to Diego Garcia, absolutely. And then I do wonder, what do you do with a bunch of bodies aboard a plane that you've got, or potentially live people that you have to deal with? And so, I mean, I don't know. I don't even really want to speculate, because it gets really dark at that point. But there are also situations where remote viewers claim to see stuff that's very similar, like what's in the videos and other stuff about the plane. I've never, as just kind of a rule, I've never really, included it as credible evidence. But, it's still a fun story to kind of see how people were piecing together where they thought the plane might be going and what options might be out there. And what I'll say is this about it, is that a lot of people out there will, laugh or what have you at certain ideas, even the idea that I'm throwing out there about, these orbs teleporting the plane. But we're in a situation where, when you've ruled everything else out, all conventional explanations, you have to start thinking outside the box. So it shouldn't be considered like completely silly that people are resorting to things that people consider in the woo, like remote viewing stuff, to try to find answers. And I think even the family members, if they had a problem with this, I think they would have reached out to me a long time ago. But I think even for them, it's like, look, we've tried everything. We know, they know the officials are lying to them. So, if people want to look at things that are, further out there as options, as answers, who knows? Maybe someone will get lucky, and maybe we'll find the truth.
Yeah, the Mark Demitio story is kind of pretty wild, but I thought it was very interesting that he said that he was monitoring this disassembly crew that was taking down parts of the plane, like the tail wreckage, and sure enough, I mean, there is the discovery of supposed tail wreckage that was actually covered in some major news stories. I think there's an Australian story that we've kind of tracked down. So if you want to put that up, Jazz. So yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, this tail wreckage, could that actually be what Demitio was talking about? So if you want to respond to that.
I'm not sure. I'd have to see what pieces they're talking about on this, because there's like a few pieces that have been tied to that have been like actually connected to the plane, but there were also cases. And can you just read to me what date that says? What date was that from?
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So that was probably just from Africa. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. Again, it's interesting. It might be a coincidence. Maybe he's legit. I don't know. 100%. I don't know. In terms of, I like I said, I do think the plane went there. And here's the thing, what I'll say is that if you throw the debris in the ocean at Diego Garcia, based on the ocean currents, it's actually a perfect match for all the debris washing ashore in Africa and Reunion Islands and South Africa and Tanzania and all these locations, which I think is wild how that's just been ignored, because it's actually physically impossible for the debris to have washed anywhere near the location where they're this seventh arc where they've been searching. Physically impossible for it to get to like South Africa, where they found a huge piece of engine cowling from a Rolls-Royce engine. It has a big RR on it. It's like there's no ambiguity over what that is. Like, those are the only engines that have that big RR on it. So yeah, when you look at Diego Garcia's, where the debris could have gone to, 100%. I'm actually curious now in terms of which piece that is, in terms of where it was found in Africa as well, because I think that here's the thing: if you say, well, if the MH370 videos are real, what happened to the plane? Did it get annihilated? Did it go to another dimension? No, I think the answer is that it stayed on planet Earth and it teleported somewhere. Why? Because we had phones that were still ringing. We have debris that we found, but we found it in the wrong continent. So what do we need to have happen? We need the plane to be somewhere else. We need it to be somewhere else closer where that debris was found. We can't have it getting annihilated in the Nicobar Islands because we found debris in Africa. Nicobar Islands is way too far away from Africa. Debris can't get over there either. So it makes sense that the plane would end up somewhere near Diego Garcia. Some people like to say that maybe the plane was shot down at Diego Garcia. I guess it's somewhat possible, but unlikely, because the problem with any shoot down theories, the debris is going to spread over hundreds of miles probably, especially if it's over the ocean and then it starts to drift around. People are going to be finding debris all over the place. These are active shipping routes. People are in the water all over. So the fact that they didn't find it anywhere indicates there's no way that somebody shot it down and then tried to cover it up. So ultimately, it's like maybe it got annihilated and then a few pieces flew off of it. I don't know. Or alternatively, the theory that I think is that it landed at Diego Garcia. Either it got teleported directly to Diego Garcia, or they teleported it somewhere over there. And then these islanders all claim to have seen the plane. And they have very credible reports of seeing this jumbo jet with steam coming out of the back of it. Again, consistent with the fire event we were talking about. And they saw it flying towards Diego Garcia. How is this all ignored? You know, like, not to diminish what you were asking me about these people with, you know, like these people have these out there theories, but like people just ignored the straight up eyewitnesses. There were 20 eyewitnesses that saw the plane, including Mike McKay sees the plane on fire the moment it goes dark. Why is everybody not saying it's obviously a fire? Instead, they say the guy's a liar and they make him lose his job. He's still stuck to a story later on after that. There's like people right off the coast, 8 fishermen, see the plane flying low just a few minutes later. That's not what you would do if you were trying to knock everybody out. It's not what you would do in a hijacking scenario or a suicidal pilot scenario at all either. But it is what you would do in a fire scenario. And then you have Catherine T, who sees the plane in the Nicobar Islands, consistent with what we see the videos, within just a few minutes of those videos being taken. Had to be under 15 minutes of when those videos got taken. And then we have another 15 witnesses, 15 people on this tiny island of 3,000 people. It's not even sure they even have an airport. They see a jumbo jet in the early morning hours flying towards Diego Garcia, and they're in the Maldives. How is it not obvious that has to be MH370 flying towards the only place to hide the airplane? There you go.
Okay, so now let's look at this leaked satellite footage from March 12, 2014 that shows MH370 disappearing with the orbs surrounding it. So yeah, let's play number 7, Jazz, and just Ashton, just feel free to walk us through what we're seeing.
So yeah, the first video was uploaded May 19th, 2014, and it says it was received March 12th, 2014, which is 4 days after the plane disappeared. So right off the bat, nobody's ever seen anything that looks like this. The reason why is because you're looking at whammy footage, wide area motion imagery, fuses satellite data, camera data, drone data to produce this. Basically, it is actually CGI, computer-generated image that's like Google Earth video playback. We're looking at a Boeing 777 here. We can see coordinates in the bottom left. This is the Nicobar Islands based on those coordinates. It says NROL 22. If you Google this and you look up fact checks, you're going to find the first fact check's incorrect. The Newsweek one is actually, they claim it's NROL 33. That's actually the only argument they make, and they're wrong. It's NROL 22, first launch of the Cyber system. And maybe we'll just play like a couple times because I want people to see what happens here. But you're actually looking at somebody recording a window. So they're recording a window. This is how this whammy footage works, is that you click on a spot and it pops up, and then you have video monitoring of it. So our satellite systems are much more advanced than what people thought. Now, we can tell this plane's flying low because of the clouds. Those are cumulus clouds. They only form at low altitudes. They're very distinct looking clouds. We can see the smoke coming out of the back of the plane. People try to say that it's contrails. Anybody tries to say this is contrails, you should not listen to anything else they say. That shows that they come from a dishonest place, because it's impossible for it to be contrails since the altitude is so low. Contrails only form at high altitudes, and we can tell this plane's at low altitude. So we can see smoke coming out of the back of the plane. And then these orbs start dancing around the plane. They come out of nowhere. This first video, if this was all we had, wouldn't really be enough. But this video is enough to prove the United States knows what happened to the plane, and they know that it got hit by these orbs, whatever these orbs are doing dancing around the plane. You can see the trajectory of the orbs change here. They start going vertical around the plane, and then they slow down a little bit at the last second. And then all of a sudden the plane's gone, but the person keeps recording. And they scroll over to the right after that. Well, okay, this video doesn't have it, but or maybe we clicked out, but they scroll over to the right, and they're doing this for no other reason other than to show us that this is real and that this plane's gone. It's not there anymore in that location. So the way this camera works again is that it can the reason why it probably says NRL 22 is that's a relay satellite, and it's beaming all the information from these various, it could be from satellites, various assets down to the computers, and the computers are just making this virtual playback that people can just watch and monitor the Earth. And this was 10 years ago. And then at the end, the person actually, you can see the cursor go back off the screen. They are closing the window. They're closing the window that we're watching here. But actually in the original video, it's black for like another minute, which indicates they're still recording. They're recording just a black screen. So the only thing that I can come up with is either they minimized or they closed the window they were recording, but they kept the recording going for another minute. And again, the only reason why you do something like that is that you're trying to prove to people that you are on a real interface, that you are recording here, and not like this isn't somebody that created this. And that would be important because the person who's leaking this would need to be able to prove that this isn't CGI or VFX or whatever, and give context clues to somebody that would see this, that knows the system, that would know right away that this is legitimate and that this is real. And you would want the coordinates and the NRO thing to be there in the bottom left, because that tells us this is the United States government. NRO is the National Reconnaissance Office. And the coordinates tell us that this is MH370, because those are the real location of the plane. All you have to do is take a ruler. And remember those military radar pings I was telling you about where the plane supposedly disappeared? Just take a ruler on the last radar track, and it goes within 50 to 100 miles of the coordinates we see in the bottom left of that. So that alone should be, like, you could convict somebody of murder with that type of evidence, just that alone. But we also have two videos. And so the first video, though, as we just saw, it was leaked few weeks, 7 weeks. It was uploaded on YouTube like 7 weeks after the plane disappeared. And it says in it that it was received by a protected source 4 days after the plane disappeared. So the story that's being told here is that somebody leaked this footage of what really happened to the plane. And we ignored this video. It was on the internet all that time for 10 years until I started researching it and realizing, as impossible as this is to believe, this is what happened. This is what happened right here to the plane.
So to understand this, so the plane 370 takes off from Malaysia, from Kuala Lumpur. It's heading for China, and at some point, this event happens when it's flying over the Nicobar Islands, and it gets portaled. The plane gets portaled through that process to somewhere close to Diego Garcia, and then the pilot will actually land the plane at Diego Garcia. That the pilot must have been in on it, or at least he.
Well, they can remote control the plane too, probably. So
okay. Remote control.
A lot of people think that they just remote controlled the plane to Diego Garcia, which is actually a simpler answer. Hey, if I had a simpler answer for you that the evidence supported, I'd say that. Like, if we found another witness like on the track towards Diego Garcia that saw it with the timeline matching up, then I'd say, yeah, they just remote controlled it. But we don't have that. That's the weird part. This plane did just vanish. It just vanished. And the only way you can really explain a plane vanishing is a portal, wormhole, teleportation, whatever you want to call it, all the same stuff. Now, if I point my finger here, you see this, the red dot farthest to the left there that's kind of lined up my finger. No, the other one, that one, to the left. That one, that dot there. If you would just go to the left a little bit and to where those islands are. So go to the left and then up a little bit where that box is above it. Yeah, so right there's some islands right there where your cursor is, basically. And so the plane actually flew like right up there. And that's where a woman in a boat was actually there. She saw the plane, saw it clearly. No lights on the plane, flying super low with smoke coming out of the back of it. Of course, she had to be discredited as well. And they never, like, she still sticks to her story 10 years later. And so that's where the plane was. And that's where the coordinates are in our video. Too close to be a hoax. Nobody could have come up with that. Because as you even pointed out here, this is 10 years later, and you pulled this graphic up. Because everybody thought either the plane went to Diego Garcia or that it just flew south to the South Indian Ocean. A lot of people thought the plane flew over Indonesia. Because why the heck would you go up north to the west to the Nicobar Islands? It makes no sense. You should either be just going directly north because you're taking the plane to Russia, like some people think, or people thought you should go to the south, whatever reason, no reason whatsoever, honestly. It was actually U.S. intelligence sources that told the world the plane went to the South Indian Ocean, by the way. So this is the kicker. That satellite data I told you about, they didn't release that data until May 27th, 2014. That's 8 days after these videos were already on the internet. So these videos were on the internet with coordinates indicating that the real answer is just take a ruler on the last radar plots, and that plane flies directly to the northwest, straight into the Nicobar Islands where it gets portaled away. That was out there before the satellite data was out there. So to me, that's absolute proof the videos must be real. If you just look at it logically. And then it's just a matter of like, well, can you believe in orbs and teleportation? Which that's why I just started to research the science, because it's like you have to actually be able to explain all these things and how they can be real. So anyway, that's the answer to what I think happened in the plane, is that this was a espionage or counter espionage, however you want to think of it, play. And it is important that those orbs happen, because the only reason why you do something this huge, which is use these orbs to teleport a plane, the only reason why you do something like this to a plane is because of the technology itself. You're preventing China from getting this technology, or China is trying to get this orb technology, and you don't want them to get it. That's the only reason I can think of why you would do something like this. Now, the people I want to say, just for the people that are saying, well, this has to be aliens, here are the two most powerful counter arguments. Just because we don't understand the engineering of something when we look at it doesn't necessarily mean humans can't create it. So what I'm saying here is that when you see anti-gravity, it doesn't always necessarily mean that aliens created it. And it's not a mutually exclusive thing. There can be both, can be true at the same time. But the other thing here too is that look at what we're looking at here from a surveillance standpoint. Either this is an operation and it's planned out ahead of time, or United States government randomly caught a plane on fire while the aliens came with orbs to save it or whatever else. Which I would just say is extremely likely, because I've never heard of anything like that ever happening before. Now, some people might disagree. And if you want to believe that, that's totally fine. I think people should believe whatever they want to believe about it. I'm just here to show you the evidence and tell you my opinion that there's no doubt these videos are real, as hard as they are to believe.
Okay. Well, Kim.com, he was one of the early supporters of the authenticity of the videos, and he offered $150,000 reward for anyone that could prove that the video was hoaxed. So you want to kind of like tell us?
Yeah. Let me correct some of those points too, because there's a lot of things that get misconstrued. It's a game of telephone. I don't blame anybody, but first of all, it is really weird that Kim.com got involved, and I should have been more skeptical right off the bat. People told me, don't get involved with Kim.com. Why was Kim.com getting involved in these videos and UFO stuff? He's never done that ever before. Also, he's a criminal who's facing extradition to the United States. I didn't know that actually at the time. I mean, I knew that he had some drama with the mega upload stuff, but I didn't realize he was facing 181 years in prison in the United States and fighting extradition in New Zealand. So he did have this great idea of putting up $100,000 bounty. And I was like, okay, but I wanted to control what the bounty was for. It's not just to prove the videos are fake, because everybody has different, like, what does proof mean? At this point, people are saying videos aren't proof anymore. I mean, so we have to have something more objective. So I made it very clear. There's a post out there. I said that, and even Kim.com, I think, says you have to come forward with the videos without the orbs in them. So what does he mean by this? And this is what I've always said on my live streams, is that we need the hoaxer to come forward with the source work. Because the idea, you don't just make these in one go. If you're making these videos, you would like layer the orbs in after you put the plane, figured out how to make the plane work in a 3-dimensional environment. So that's what we were always waiting on. There is no hoaxer for these videos. No one was ever going to come forward. So 2 other people got really involved in this. There was one that ran for higher office, ran for Congress. That was one of my followers, still is. That threw in another, I think it was 20 or 25,000. I can't remember the exact numbers. And then Chad and Sherry from Investigate Earth also threw in another 20, 25,000. So I added an extra 5,000, which made it a $150,000 bounty. So yeah, Kim.com got really involved. I had several conversations with him on video, although he never showed his face on any of the videos that we did. And then we had the whole photographer saga happen, like pretty soon after that. Like a month. And so this guy, well, what really happened is that all of a sudden one night, there's this post on Reddit that a 6-day-old brand new Reddit account was looking around on picture websites and finds these stock photos. And somehow, like you have to stretch a couple of the clouds, what have you, somehow Rain Man and realize these are these clouds are the same clouds that we see in the MH370 videos. They were looking at these and somehow realized those are the same clouds. Now, I think most people out there right away should be pretty suspicious of this, because you probably looking at those clouds right now going, how would I know those are the right clouds, especially if I'm just looking at them in a huge group of clouds. What made it even more weird was the 6-day-old Reddit account claimed that they were able to do this in 20 minutes on this website that has 150 sets of photos. Later on, we would have the photographer of these pictures gets contacted. The photographer, then these pictures are supposedly 2 seconds apart, I believe, or 2 minutes apart, maybe. That's a big change in angle. What I want to point out, though, is that, so Redditors found this, debunkers found these, and then they contacted the photographer. Why are you contacting the photographer? Why are you contacting the photographer? That's such a weird thing. Like, wouldn't you just like present them out there? They contacted the photographer right away, and they got the photographer to try to make a debunk video. So we're talking, the timeline is we're not even an hour into these videos these images getting found. And we're already, the guy that took the pictures, who has no reason to be involved in this whatsoever, is now being contacted by Redditors. He would admit this to us, and deciding that he's going to make a debunk video. And he direct messages me, and he wants to like warn me that he's going to make this debunk video. And I'm sitting here like, dude, what is happening right now? Because at that point, I was already sure the videos have to be real. So whatever was happening here, I was sure it was some sort of scam or something like that. I don't know what was going on, but believe it or not, there are people out there that are completely mentally ill and obsessed with me to the degree where like their whole lives revolve around the things that I do. It's just a sad reality of how some people are. So I thought for sure this must be some kind of scam. So I go to sleep, wake up, not going to worry about it, whatever. Next day, photographer has made a debunk video claiming that here's how you can take the clouds and get them to match into our video. The argument being that somebody must have found these images on the internet and used them to make the satellite video. Therefore, the videos must therefore be fake. Photographer has talked to Kim.com, or I don't remember the exact timeline of this part, but Kim.com calls me in the morning and says, you've got to come out and say these videos are fake, blah, blah, blah. I want to set up a call with the photographer, all this stuff. So my whole day is kind of dedicated to this. And he's pressing me to say that these clouds clearly match. They must be the same. Okay, let's just kind of skip ahead a little bit. I put a post out there saying that like, okay, you know what? These clouds, they match. I can't say these videos are real anymore, what have you. The photographer was definitely on board this plane. He definitely took some pictures on board this plane. How can you deny that? What have you? Even though the whole situation gave me a sick feeling because it all felt really sketchy. And it was really weird how Kim.com was just ready to go with it right away. So right away, there was a bunch of people telling me like, this isn't right. Something's going on here. And we start investigating and the whole story starts to fall apart. So this is the weird part too about this is that, so Kim.com wanted to pay Jonas $100,000. I'm like, for what? This guy that took the pictures, he said he didn't make the videos. He had nothing to do with making the videos. We tried to get them to tell us like who bought the pictures. Like Jonas knows the website owner. So all these people involved in this all know each other as well. And these guys all know the Corridor crew too, that like tried to debunk me on some other podcast that also do scams and pranks on people all the time. So the whole thing was extremely sketchy. And so I agree. I try to convince Kim, well, just give him like $10,000 if you want to give him anything. And he's like, okay. So Jonas, we do a 3-way call later that morning. He agrees he's going to take $10,000, but Kim says, and this is the part where it's like, Kim has some good ideas, but I can't tell if he's just like owned by the government or what his deal is. But he says, have him sign an affidavit. So Jonas says he'll sign an affidavit for $10,000. Kim was going to give him the money right there, actually. He actually asked for his wallet. We have this all recorded, by the way. And he says he'll take it. Okay, great. So the whole thing starts to fall apart later that evening and afternoon. Jonas had told us that, well, anything could be faked, right? Because we were, wasn't really pressing him, but trying to get all the information about it. Seems like he was out there. And he says that, they can't tell us who got the pictures. So we say, well, he probably just got the pictures from a torrent. Jonas tells us this, that the website would get torrented, which means that all their pictures would get stolen, pirated off the website, and then put onto somewhere where you can download them for free. So I had this genius idea just a few hours after I made this tweet. Well, let's go look at the torrents. We go look at those torrents. There's got to be one for CG textures. We found multiple. And one's from before the videos were taken and after the videos were taken. And I thought, well, if these images, I thought maybe the images were modified or something like that. We would go back there and we should be able to see proof that either the images were modified or that those images exist out there and therefore the videos must be fake. What did we find when we looked at the torrents? Nothing. The images didn't exist. They didn't exist at all. So then we looked at the Internet Archive. Internet Archive can't lie, right? If the Internet Archive shows the images existing before the videos, boom, it's proven the videos must be fake. They don't exist before the videos. There is no evidence those images exist anywhere on the internet before 2016. And here's the best part. This is the absolute 100% killer to the images. And we haven't even talked about forensically how you would take cloud images and put them in the videos yet. So we don't even have to get to that part yet, because other images from the same flight that Jonas Duro was on that same day do exist on the Wayback Machine in 2013, 2012, 2013, before the videos were on the internet. Somehow, the 5 images in question from the set of images, they're all just missing. They don't exist until 2016, which is 2 years after the videos were already on the internet. So we have a major forensic problem right off the bat, which is, go ahead.
Well, kind of like, in a way, I guess, gaslighted or hoaxed yourself by Kim.com and Jonas Duro claiming that these photos prove that the video was a hoax, because as you did your due diligence, and I know I've seen one investigation online that showed that none of those cloud photos actually predate the video on the internet. So in that sense, yeah, I guess when you made that tweet where you could no longer claim, I'm just quoting from your tweet, that I no longer claim that the videos are authentic due to this evidence, that was you were kind of like deceived in a way by this Jonas and Kim.com collaborating.
No, I don't want to give, so I just want to stop you there, because I don't want to assign necessarily motive, at least not to Jonas, because it's possible that, he was just being used. When I look at the whole situation, it seems like maybe he was just being used in it. Like, why did he get involved? And this is one of the first things I told him is, like, don't get involved in this if you don't want to be involved, because he's like, oh, I don't want to be involved. Well, then don't get involved. The moment you start making debunk videos, and by the way, his debunk video has been deleted off of YouTube, and Jonas Duro has separated himself from this entire ordeal, by the way. Kim.com, though, I do feel like is a scumbag and a con artist. And I think he's been a scumbag and a criminal and a con artist his whole life. And that's how he's lived his life. And it wouldn't surprise me at all to find out that the U.S. government directed him to come and get connected to me, because it's something he's never done before, ever. And I tried to show him this counter evidence that very same day. I've showed all the tweets on live stream, or all the DMs on live stream, because Kim.com edited the tweets out of context so that it made it look like I was like admitted the videos were fake. And if you look at the very next tweets, it shows the exact opposite. It actually shows that I showed Kim the proof that the images post-date the videos, and then he ignored it. And he 100% ignored it. That's the truth about the Kim.com saga. Kim.com is a rat and a liar. And if you trust him for anything, you will get burned 100%.
Okay, so now let's kind of like get into the technology itself, because I think that's probably the most interesting part of this story. This kind of portal technology where you can have these plasma orbs directed towards a aircraft, and it can kind of like create a portal effect. So yeah, I mean, let's kind of like focus in on that. So I mean, this is highly classified technology. The US was wanting to do this so that the Chinese could see what kind of technology the US had. So it was really aimed to kind of like intimidate the Chinese, and at the same time deny them access to these advanced semiconductors technology that the 20 scientists were taking to China on that plane.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, obviously the full motive, because a lot of people say, why this? Why this? People want you to be able to answer every little nook and cranny of the whole, motive and narrative. But at the end of the day, the only people that could do that would be the U.S. government. But we can speculate at a high level, of course. And if you have the drone video, that would be useful to show as well. People may have been saying, why don't the clouds move? I hear this all the time as well, which is the clouds do move. Actually, they evolve in that video, but you have to speed it up to see the clouds actually evolving, not just moving. And the reason why there's so little movement is because, well, if it's from satellite sensor data, then it's really far away. So you're going to see very little movement, and each sequence was only a few seconds. But the other reason why it couldn't be cloud images in the videos is because it would require a 3D rendered environment to make these, because we have a second video that's a drone video from a completely different angle from the other side of the plane. And the clouds actually match in both videos. You can triangulate the location of the drone that's cropped out of the satellite video. And this drone video is the most important video that has ever been seen in the world. And I think that history, although that sounds like a bold statement, history, I think, will vindicate me, because when we look at this drone video, you can tell that those orbs that were spinning around the plane, they aren't like a metal ball. They are a ball of plasma. Now, there might be something inside of it. It's hard to tell, but we can see the field of plasma around them, and it's almost ambient temperatures. It's blue and green, which are, we can tell this is a thermal video that we're looking at. And that we can tell the temperature gradient. We can see the engines are red hot, but these orbs are not that hot. They're not white hot like the sun. So this is a ball of cold plasma. We can tell just from looking at it. The way they seem to kind of vector and lock in the plane looks really unnatural, but at the same time, it's so precise when they spin around the plane. This is something where I would question if even 3D rendered software could really even have pulled off accurately in 2014. It's so hard to do that kind of stuff. And even when you look at it, it looks hard to pull off, because you can tell right at it, it's not humans or aliens inside the orbs. It's like they create a perfect triangle around the plane when they're spinning around it. And this is where I've speculated that it has to be either a supercomputer or actual AI, maybe even to the point of advanced general intelligence that vectors those orbs around the plane. And then there's two things that really are probably the biggest part, and they're connected, which is the endothermic properties of the propulsion, and then also what we see happen to the plane in the drone video, which both of them are these lines in front of the orbs guiding them forward. We're going to see this again in the UFO world. Like, some more videos will leak where we'll see this propulsion. And it looks like the orbs basically have no mass, and they're just following these train tracks, which is these dark lines, these cold lines. And when the orbs converge, they converge at the end. And then all of a sudden, this black, let's call it a wormhole or black hole, opens up and closes. And they're all just gone. But it's black, which means it's cold. So the fact that this tells us these are cold tells us that this is an endothermic, an absorption of energy, as opposed to an explosion, which would be a white hot release of energy. So this is why these videos, and that video particularly, is so huge. It shows us that there's something fundamentally we don't understand correctly about physics in our universe, which the science shows, if you dig into it, I think you'll find the same conclusion that I did, is that the answer is 0 point energy, that there is something below what we would consider absolute zero. Below the bottom, there's this energy, this well of energy below us that we're just not all around us all the time, that we're not perceiving. And this is the source of energy for UFOs, let's call them. So that's why those videos, that especially that second video, is so huge. Plus, it obviously corroborates the first video. Before anybody asks, yes, both videos are perfectly in sync. The orbs are spinning around the plane in the same direction in both videos. It's hard to like figure out in your mind because they're like this on opposite sides of the plane moving between them. But yeah, perfectly in sync. Go ahead.
Now, Salvador Cesar Paez, I mean, he is a well-regarded Navy scientist, and when he saw the video of the orbs surrounding the MH370, that plane, that he had a theory about what was going on. We have a video clip of that, so we just want to play the first 50 seconds of that, and then I'll get you to comment.
Yeah, sure.
Oh man, when I saw those orbs, I saw this thing, this one orb just start exactly what it's doing now. Just start to go around this thing. And all of a sudden it started to join another one and then another one. And I said, oh my God, they're forming a bubble of non-ionizing radiation around this thing. There's no way what's about to happen. I anticipated, do you understand? I knew before that black hole happened. Let's call it a black hole.
You knew that was going to happen beforehand?
I knew that would happen. I knew that would happen. That's why when I said, this is it. This is the Paez effect.
Yeah, I love my facial reaction on that when he says that he knew what was going to happen, but to the plane before it happened. The first time he saw this video, that was great. Yeah. So in this clip, so this is the one that Sal says that they were bathing the plane in non-ionizing radiation. Truthfully, I haven't fully grasped all of that. I mean, I can tell a wormhole when I see a wormhole, but in terms of like how and why the orbs are spinning around the plane, I mean, the way it sounds to me is like explaining they're making a bubble around the plane. And actually, people early on mapped the movement of the orbs around the plane, and they actually do like make a sphere around the plane. If you were to like crunch it down, time down to like one thing, it does make a sphere around the plane, which is interesting. Maybe somehow they are doing that. But I think the main action we see is definitely at the end. But yeah, to have Salvador Paez, who's got how many Navy patents? 5 patents from the U.S. Navy that are like UFO patents, that he's now openly talking about how are these patents allowed to be made public. For him to come out and say that he knew what was going to happen in these videos, people need to wake up. The person that did this to the plane is the U.S. Navy. The U.S. Navies are they're the perpetrators of the plane dispute. That's what everybody said. Everybody, China, Russia, like the guy that leaked the videos is U.S. Navy. They're all U.S. Navy. So people should be listening to Salvador Paez. I mean, do you guys really think? Does anyone really think someone could fake what we're looking at right there? That, and look at each frame change that was just happening there. The heat signature changes in the belly too. Look at the heat signature change in the belly of the plane. That's not a VFX that some plug in or something like that. That's a real plane with a real heat signature of smoke coming out of the belly of the plane. So yeah, Sal saying he knew what was going to happen and that was the Paez effect, which is where the Schwinger limit's being breached, which is essentially saying that you're ripping through the fabric of reality to the true nothingness of reality, which you could also argue is a singularity or a wormhole or a black hole. These terms, we kind of use them as different things, but it may turn out that they're all one and the same thing when we really understand the universe. But the biggest change here is, again, the physics. Is that this shows that it's not that Einstein's wrong. Actually, all of this physics comes from Einstein's equations. People have engineered Einstein's equations to say, like, how can we break these equations? And what they found when they started messing around with the equations and unifying them with quantum mechanics is that we can amplify energy, and potentially we can reduce the energy requirement as well. So what people have been saying now about wormholes is that wormholes are mathematically shown to exist in Einstein's general relativity. But they say, well, it takes this huge amount of energy. This amount of energy is the whole solar system. That's what they say, stuff like that. But if you can reduce the energy requirement by conditioning the vacuum itself, changing the permittivity and permeability of the vacuum, which people currently believe is a constant, and say, no, it's not a constant. We can change those values. Then just using Einstein's equations, you can change the energy requirement to achieve a wormhole. And what does this do? Well, now you just opened up Star Trek, aliens, anything you want can now exist and make sense. Even free energy, which is what this is, in my opinion, this is all about. Not even just the videos, not even just the plane, not even those orbs, the entire UFO phenomenon. I think ultimately, if you were to distill it down, it's going to come back to free energy.
Well, there's a letter that was sent to you in January 2024, and that letter had some very interesting kind of thoughts in there regarding what was going on. So, I don't know, do you want to whether read it or summarize this letter that was sent to you?
Yeah, so this was January 9th or 10th, something like that, 2024. That I got this letter that was, somebody just told me, like, hey, you got to check this video out on YouTube. Like, it's addressed to you. It was literally called Diego Garcia, Whistleblower, a letter to Ashton Forbes. I surely hope this is the weirdest thing that ever happens in my life, because, man, it's pretty creepy when you get a letter addressed to you on YouTube, especially when it's like a super well-produced one, where it's like, this would win A+ on some, college homework assignment. 11-minute long letter. Long story short, the letter is like encouraging me to keep pushing forward. And keep in mind, this is after the Kim.com saga, like a month after. And I was at a low point after that. You get people hate on you. You feel like you got trapped, what have you. And I was just thinking, should I just do something else? And this letter, like, I feel like this was somebody who was watching, who was like, hey, you're really close, but you need to just lock in. And they wanted me to... everything I told you about the story of what happened in the plane, it's all basically lined up, like laid out in this letter. And before I read this letter, I thought it was more plausible that they try to rescue the plane versus some type of weird teleportation or annihilation thing that they were doing to it. And after this, I'm certain now that it was the U.S. government, and it was an operation from the beginning. The whole thing was an operation from the beginning. It's the only story that really makes the most sense with all the evidence. And the letter also doesn't just tell me about the operation and how these operations work and how we've been doing many of them, but also about the technology. And that the technology is essentially plasmoids, EVOs, exotic vacuum objects. So I started digging into that. It wanted me to find Randall Carlson, and there was this clip that had gone viral about him talking about plasmoids. So I started researching that, and I found out that there was this guy named Ken Shoulders who worked with Hal Puthoff. Hal Puthoff is a physicist, scientist who's also a spook, probably one of the main gatekeepers of the UFO phenomenon, affiliated with the government. And Ken Shoulders, they worked together. And Ken Shoulders was making these balls of plasma that were self-sustaining. And he found out when you create these balls of plasma, you do that exact thing that I mentioned before. You manipulate the permittivity and permeability of space-time. So now the balls of plasma can be what we can use to engineer general relativity, which means now these balls of plasma can represent like a tap into the energy that's all around us. Free energy, cold fusion. They can also represent a propulsion mechanism with these balls of plasma. And I think that Ken Shoulders found that these balls of plasma are some very easy to produce base product of nature once you understand that the universe is filled with energy. and that it's not an empty vacuum, and that maybe any civilization, not just humanity, but a non-human intelligence as well, would all figure this out. And then once you understand that these balls of plasma exist, they unlock Star Trek level technology for your civilization overnight.
I just wanted to read out this portion of that letter because I think it really does kind of give us an overall context for understanding what really happened with flight MH370, because you had the 20 semiconductor scientists there that were flying to China with this kind of breakthrough technology.
You know what? I'll read it out because I've listened to it like 50 times, so like I basically have it memorized. It says Flight MH370 arrived at our base by our hand at 1856 UTC after we picked it up midair outside the island of Great Nicobar. Just one of many, many things we do. We can pick up anything, anywhere, and deliver it in an instant, like a magic FedEx. Some facts about why it happened. MH370 had defectors on board. They were running to China with American technology. They are Chinese by blood and had gotten themselves into a situation with the Chinese regime who had gotten them to choose to defect. The whole play, everything, and I mean everything about it, was a political play to show the Chinese who's their daddy. That's us. Some facts about how it happened. All passengers are dead, all but the handful of deflectors. And that's, I think they said it was like a error. It's supposed to say defectors, but something about like the person who wrote this might not be an English speaker. The plane did not crash. The plane was on fire. We know because we started it. The plane was picked up by us on fire midair right in front of the Chinese. The Chinese regime knows exactly what happened, and that was the whole point of the operation. So this is one of the other detail at the very beginning I want to point out. 1856 UTC. That's a unique. They're saying that this is when we picked up the plane, whatever that means. The time that we had speculated the plane was being teleported to the Nicobar Islands was 1843 UTC. And you may wonder, how can you know with such a high degree of accuracy the exact time? You're saying, you know the time the plane was being teleported in those videos? Yes, because we can extrapolate it based on those radar data. So roughly around 1843 UTC, we think the plane's being teleported. This person's saying 13 minutes after that, they picked it up, whatever that means. That's a very narrow window, and that's just a unique data point. So a lot of this evidence was stuff that was, of course, we had figured out because I had already investigated the case for 6 to 8 months by the time this had dropped. But it was also adding really unique things in that I had never, that also there's no way to verify as well. Stuff like that. And this is what shows that this is not written by an AI. AI didn't write this. AI read it out, voiced it out, but it did not write this. So a human wrote this letter. Pretty crazy, huh?
It's a very plausible explanation for what happened. I think that, I mean, the US does have a lot of covert technologies, and that to demonstrate one of these covert technologies in front of China would give them pause in terms of their kind of regional and strategic aspirations. So this happened in 2014. So the Chinese were aware that the US has that kind of technology, and so it kind of like was as it said. I mean, we wanted to show the Chinese who's daddy, and I think that's a big part of why the US is in this kind of global hegemonic position that it's in, because it's not just what conventional kind of military and economic means that the US has and that is kind of fairly well known, but it's also these covert technologies that they have, and that the countries like China are still playing catch up.
I think you 100% nailed it. And I think that if you look at it, like if you have an A-bomb, a nuke, like how do you prove to somebody that you have a nuke? Without, you can use it, and we did in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And that's the reason why everybody, even to this day, is afraid of nukes. Otherwise, if we hadn't used it, people would be saying, "No, you made it up. You don't have that capability." You know, that's how people would be acting. So if you have, let's say, some teleportation / annihilation magical orbs, then you want to prove that to the adversary. But you also don't want them to figure out how to make it at the same time. So this is the reason why these videos are, they're the biggest leak in military intelligence history by a pretty wide margin, I'd guess. I mean, obviously I don't know the other leaks, but for these videos to leak, what it did was it showed China exactly what the orbs are and how they can make their own. Because I know that because I've been able to figure out exactly what the orbs are and how I could theoretically make the orbs. So for a CCP or for Russia, they probably figured this out many years ago. And this is also probably part of the reason why nobody has silenced me or stopped me or reached out to me to what have you, is that they already know it's damaged goods, these videos are, and that China and Russia have already figured out this technology out there. But I agree, they're playing catch up. This goes to show that they wanted China and Russia to have like really low resolution imagery, or like they wanted them to know that the US did this and they covered it up, but they didn't want them to see exactly how it works. So that's the reason why they got so upset when Lieutenant Commander Edward Lin leaked these videos, or he showed somebody the videos and then they got onto the internet and it got back to him because he was part of this VPU2 wizard squad. And they are this secret, not really secret. Yeah, no, they are secret. You know, it's known about, but they run secret operations for the U.S. Navy and intelligence. Most likely, they're like a spy plane. They run the P-8 Poseidons and the Ares E3 EP Ares 2 planes. And so he was in the exact right position and right rank to have access to the videos that we were looking at there. Which to me kind of just seals the deal for the whole thing. And they tried to obfuscate his case, and they wouldn't like explain what it was that he leaked that got him in so much trouble. It's pretty obviously those videos. And so, yeah, I just think that this technology, when you really dig into the implications, whoever controls this technology controls the world, UFO technology or whatever it is. So the crazy part, the thought process, and I want to get your opinion on this, that I have is like, if people were to admit that those videos were real, I wonder what percentage of Americans would say, oh no, that's justified because we can't let China have this technology, even though we zapped a plane of 239 people and all those lives, all that blood is on our hands. I think people would say it's a small price to pay to make sure that China doesn't have orb technology or whatever. And this goes to show, the reason why I bring this up is that I think this is a political issue. I think the whole UFO phenomenon, this technology is all a major political issue. Like, how do you deal with technology that moves us up the Kardashev scale like several notches immediately, you know?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that is well known that the US already prescribes certain advanced technologies from being shipped to China, advanced semiconductors, supercomputers, and so forth. But then you have all these covert technologies, or maybe breakthrough technologies that these scientists had independently developed. And I could well see that the intelligence community would never allow that plane to land there in China, and that they did what they did. So I wanted to kind of like now shift a little bit and start talking about some of these related advanced technologies, because it does kind of take us into some other kind of very interesting areas. So like cold fusion and low energy nuclear reaction. So yeah, you want to tell us about what cold fusion is, how it's related to low energy nuclear reaction?
Yeah, the simplest way to think of it is that when we're trying to fuse things, we're trying to bring them together. And with hot fusion, what they're trying to do is they're trying to add energy, because the more energy they add, the more the particles are moving around, which is higher chance of a collision where things are going to fuse together. I call hot fusion a scam. I call it stupid, because the moment you realize space is not empty and that we can actually manipulate gravity, and by manipulating the permittivity and permeability of a region of space, like I've been saying multiple times, like with a ball of plasma, now you realize, well, we can use gravity to make things come together. And we see this effect happening with the Casimir effect, which is one of the proven experiments that shows zero-point energy exists. Take two plates, put them really close together, and they just naturally will come together without you doing anything at all. And that's a force that we can use for energy. It's been proven, or at least theoretically proven, that we can do that by Robert Forward in 1984. And this is how we can potentially produce cold fusion, which is forcing these ions to come together and to fuse and create a new element to transmute something. And then when that happens, they release energy. And this is the whole idea of fusion. So cold fusion is the same concept as hot fusion in terms of causing things to come together. But that's where the similarities end. Beyond that, cold fusion, one of the main arguments of cold fusion was that it was producing excess energy, meaning that we're getting more energy out than in. And this is where, if you listen to a lot of people out there, this is the huge controversy over it. Cold fusion is just a 0-point energy tap. It's a way to tap into the 0-point energy the same way we're using oil well to tap into oil underground. It's the medium that we're using to tap into it. And so if we can manipulate our region of space-time and cause these ions to come together naturally, then we can use that for fusion. And so there are multiple patents out there about using magnetically confined compression to cause fusion to occur, where conventional physics says you cannot compress plasma. But if we can compress plasma down, then it's obvious that this will lead to fusion occurring. And if it turns out that this method of fusion is very obviously over unity, then this is the reason why you would hide this, because over unity just means free energy. It means that free energy doesn't mean you're putting nothing in. A lot of people think that free energy means you're putting nothing in and you're getting something out. Free energy just means you're getting more out than it took to put in. So when we talk about free energy over unity, we're really talking about alternative energies similar to wind and solar. You wouldn't say a wind plant and a solar plant is a free energy device, but it really is, because it's giving us energy and we're doing nothing. We're just harnessing the energy of nature all around us. You can do that same thing with 0-point energy. Exact same thing with 0. There's energy all around us. We can harness it. And that's what's happening with cold fusion. And I would argue that even hot fusion will prove that this concept is real with just less efficiency. And this is probably part of the reason why hot fusion has not been allowed or has never really produced anything in 50 to 70 years. So in 1989, Pons and Fleischmann came forward. They said that we put these palladium metal rods in heavy water and we saw excess energy and we saw fusion. Helium was getting produced. And the world said, no, this can't be possible because it's too simple. The setup for it, there was something you could just do in your garage. And they were claiming that in some cases, these cells they would build, because they would make a bunch of them to test them. Some of the cases, they claimed the water was boiling. The water started boiling. So where's all that energy coming from to cause the water to boil? You're just putting metal in heavy water and running a current through it. So 60 labs recreated the experiments, either the fusion or the excess energy or both. And then all of a sudden the DOE came in with MIT. You know what they did? They created a tribunal. They literally created a tribunal and went to all the labs that had papers that showed positive results, and they went and debunked them. Made them they didn't really make them, but they like peer pressured them and shamed them into retracting all their papers. So all the significant papers got retracted, and then cold fusion was buried and not allowed to exist anymore. And a guy named Eugene Malov was the writer of Free Energy magazine for MIT. Prominent guy. He blew the whistle on it. Said MIT faked the results to make it look like there was no positive results. And MIT was the main one working with the DOE. And even now today, this last year, MIT got $60 million in just one grant from the DOE for hot fusion. And then Eugene Malov, well, what happened to him? Well, a few years later, it turned out he just got stomped to death in his own home. And then it wasn't solved until like 4 years later that his neighbors did it. Pretty weird circumstance. So that's the story of cold fusion in a nutshell, everybody.
Yes, I believe you can maybe have more information about this. Either Pons or Fleischmann that came up with that pioneering paper in 1989, that they went over to Japan and they continued the cold fusion project there.
Yep.
in a low-key way. So I don't know, did you have any information about that?
Yeah, I think it was with Toyota. I could be wrong, or it was one of the Japanese companies that they did. But end of the day, here's the thing: is that my opinion is they showed that there is this property of physics this ether of energy, the 0 point energy all around us, but they didn't really know how it was working. They just saw this anomalous phenomenon occurring. And that's likely not the most efficient way to do it. They just found a way that proves this phenomenon is real. I think people like Ken Shoulders with their balls of plasma, their exotic vacuum objects, they found cold fusion as well, but they found a much more efficient way to do it, as opposed to dealing with balls of water and metal rods. They just realized that we can just take plasma itself and we can compress a plasma and we can cause fusion to happen that way. And it's the same phenomenon. Both of them are different than hot fusion, and cold fusion is just a name that was given these alternative methods of fusion. Now they've broken it up into low energy nuclear reactions, catalyzed fusion, muon catalyzed fusion. I don't know what other names. There's so many different names that they use for it. End of the day, they're all cold fusion. And cold fusion is going to win at the end of the day. It's going to turn out that cold fusion is going to be the answer. And my money's on the balls of plasma, the EVOs, the plasmoids, because they can produce over unity in the form of electricity instead of heat. So remember, the Pons and Fleischmann is heating up your cell as water with metal rod in it, and the cell is boiling, which is nice because you can produce steam. That's what we do with nuclear reactors, produce steam, spin a turbine, and then produce energy. That seems inefficient to me. To me, the efficient way is you take your ball of plasma and you just pull electricity directly from it, and it just stays there forever. So that in the future, what I imagine, and man, if this is true, this will look really good in the future, is that we replace our hot water heaters that we have, our furnace that we have, and you just have a EVO machine, a cold fusion machine, we might call it, but it's just a ball of plasma, and it's producing electricity that powers everything in your house.
Oh, that's very interesting. Now, I've worked with a contactee, Elena Danan. I don't know if you've heard of her. She is in contact with some extraterrestrials that she has, believes that they're part of the Galactic Federation. But she talks about blue energy or blue plasma, that's the kind of future of energy. So I'm wondering if that's a kind of cold fusion or free energy that is coming, this kind of blue energy. Have you heard of that?
Then the color may be significant, but I'm not sure. I think that they can change the color probably at will the color is based on the wavelength of light. So what they're trying to do with these balls of plasma is create a standing wave in them. So a standing wave, if you were to draw a squiggly line, it would be like you would want it to be perfectly cut off between, you want it to start right here, your squiggly line, you want it to end right here, but the waves need to be exactly the same for each wavelength, right? So you create a standing wave and you've got it perfectly in this region that you've created. And if you do this, now you've got your perfect standing wave in here, then I think you can create like a harmonic resonance where now you can have a ball of plasma that can float around. And what that frequency is apparently the big secret sauce that the government is hiding to be able to allow that to happen. Because if you know the exact frequency and you can do that and recreate that, now everybody can just create a ball of plasma everywhere. Everyone can have their own little Jarvis that maybe you can even put AI inside of it. And so I hope that happens. But I do think that plasma is the answer because of its ease of creating. All plasma is. Think of it like this. Take the air around us. There's water in the air. There's hydrogen in the air, right? Moisture. You can take just the hydrogen atoms in the air and strip off the one electron that's on the hydrogen atom. And now you have a free electron, and now you have a positively charged ion. That's all plasma is. It's just a bunch of that. We've stripped off these electrons. You have these electrons clustered over here. And what we found out, or what Ken Shoulders found out, was that for some reason, these electrons, they should be repelling each other, but they like stick together. And so now you've got this plasma, that's what we see as a plasma, where it's just these electrons separated from their parent, if you want to think of it, the ion, the positive charged ion. And here's the real fun part. It's like, what is energy? Where does energy and electricity even come from? If you really think about it, like how our energy, most of our energy works like a battery or a capacitor. It's essentially just a positive side and a negative side. And when you connect it to a circuit, the negative side is trying to flow to the positive side. And the energy runs out when this thing is neutralized, where there's no more negative charge over here and it's just neutralized out. That's when the energy stops flowing. So isn't that kind of interesting? Because now what's a ball of plasma? Well, we're separating the negative charge from the positive charge. Oh, let me move this with my hands up here. So are we creating a battery? Are we creating a capacitor? Is there going to be current that's going to flow from the positive to the negative in our ball of plasma? Why not? Because lightning is the exact same thing. And this is why they call these plasma balls ball lightning, because lightning itself is just a plasma. And at some point, the voltage gets strong enough where it can just rip right through the air. And it rips through the air and creates the plasma that we see as a lightning strike. So why do I bring this up? Is that I think that what's happened is that the US government, maybe they figured it out from aliens. I don't know where they figured it out from. Maybe anybody. But they figured out at some point how they can take this plasma and have it become a free-floating, self-sustaining, meaning that the energy is not able to escape. The energy is stuck in this region of space-time, like a ball, and that it can be stabilized. They can stabilize it. So it's stuck there, and then they can move it around like a drone. And that this is just some natural phenomenon of the nature of the physics of our universe, that we can produce this. And that they've decided that it's a huge national security risk because of the free energy aspect involved in it, but also because of what you saw in the MH370 videos. Obviously, it can easily be turned into a weapon. Whether or not that plane's being annihilated or teleported, my guess is that that technology can do both. Just like a flip of the switch, and you want to do something else, which means that that technology could represent a doomsday weapon far beyond nukes, far, far beyond them. Make them look like firecrackers is the quote that a lot of people in the UFO community say, and I think they're right.
So I wanted to bring up gravity manipulation, because I know you've done some research on this, and you have looked at the filtering of Maxwell's or James Maxwell's equations from the 19th century. And so these were filtered so as to not show how electromagnetism is connected to gravity. And you also talk about extended electrodynamics, where you do have this kind of combination of gravity and electromagnetics. So you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So, have you ever talked to Tom Montauk before? You ever spoken to him?
Not yet, no.
You should definitely hit him up. He's the expert at scalar physics. He's an engineer and physicist. He's also just a genius. And he taught me something really profound, which I think it's profound because anyone can understand this, is that we were taught in our current view of physics with Maxwell's equations, general relativity, et cetera, that if I take this rubber band and I pull on both sides equally, that there's nothing there. But is that really true? Let's do a thought experiment. Let's just say I'm pulling equally at 1 unit on both sides right now, and I increase that to 2 units of pull on both sides. Well, again, physics would say that since both sides are canceling each other out, there's nothing there. I pull 3 times as hard. There's a lot of stress on this rubber band. You can tell that at some point, if I keep pulling, this rubber band is going to snap. But it's not going left or it's not going right. So is there really nothing there when I'm stretching this rubber band? No, there is something there. There's the stress. Stress in the medium of the rubber band is increasing as I pull equally on both sides. You could argue that that's the same thing that's happening with space-time relative to a relationship with electromagnetism, is that we can stress space-time to the point where we can manipulate or create a second-order effect that we would call gravity. And how is this possible? It's possible because we're in this equilibrium of energy all around us. So imagine that the ocean surface is completely flat. It's completely flat and it's uniform as equilibrium. Or like you're in your bathtub and the temperature of the bathtub equals your body temperature and it feels like cold or neutral. That's what we're in all the time. And what gravity is are the little bumps up and down, like a planet, like Earth, or really any mass. But the idea is that we can manipulate this energy. If we pull the energy out, well, that energy has to go somewhere. Where is it going to go? Up here, into our reality. You could argue that this is where all the energy around us is coming from all the time. There's a very interesting video on Vertasium YouTube where he talks about that the energy doesn't actually flow through wires. It's not flowing through wires, it's flowing through fields, which implies that the energy isn't coming from the power plant. Is that the power plant is just a medium, a conduit for the energy to flow from all around us directly into the lights around us. So if we pull this energy out in front of us, we're going to create a gravitational well. Just like if we were to add energy, we also create a gravitational well. So positive and potentially and negative gravity can be produced, or negative energy density can be produced. And if we were to pull a huge amount of energy out, what's going to happen? I'd argue that's a wormhole. When you reach to the point where you break through the fabric of reality, you produce a wormhole. That's what Einstein's general relativity tells us in the equations. So does that answer your question about...
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So just to follow up with this extended electrodynamics, how does that lead to spacecraft being much bigger on the inside than how they look on the outside?
That's one of the great things that I have thought about a lot, is that the extended electrodynamics is essentially what I told you about before, which is that Hal Puthoff, others as well, have looked at general relativity and said, okay, how do we unify this with electromagnetism, and how do we unify this with quantum mechanics? And so they look at the equations and they find ways where you can, replace this in general relativity with this in quantum mechanics. And then now we can manipulate all these effects, including gravity, mass, and inertia, that we didn't think that we could manipulate at all before. Sorry, can you repeat the question? I just got sidetracked. Was that...
Yeah, just with the extended electrodynamics, how does that lead to spacecraft being much bigger on the inside?
Oh, yeah, the inside versus outside. Yeah. So the way this was actually just described, where you could have two different layers of plasma that could somehow make it so that an inner region is inside a bubble. And here's the thing. This is actually a really interesting thought, is that if you create a bubble that's disconnected from space-time entirely, how big would that bubble look like from the outside? Is there a limitation on that? If I make a bubble around an NFL stadium that can hold 80,000, 50 to 100,000 people, college, football stadium, whatever, football stadium, how big does that bubble look like from the outside? Does that bubble have to be the same size as an NFL stadium? Or can it look like a small bubble in a glass of water? That's the idea of how a craft could be bigger on the inside than on the outside, is that you've literally displaced a portion of it from space-time entirely. Those orbs in the MH370 videos, they look like they're about 20 feet across diameter. Maybe there's something bigger inside there, but maybe not. Because I think a counter question would be, not necessarily is something bigger on the inside versus the outside, but do you want to be inside of one of these things? And why would I say that? Because if you understand physics, you understand that when you manipulate gravity, you manipulate space-time. And the reason why space and time are one word is because space and time come together, and they are based on gravity. Gravity is the curvature of space-time. So if you're in a UFO that's riding a gravity wave or using gravity as propulsion, you're in a time machine. Not necessarily a sci-fi time machine, but you're in a time machine. But this is a scary time machine, because when you get in this time machine, you might come out and it's 10 years later, but you were only inside the time machine in the UFO craft for 10 minutes. How is that possible? It's called time dilation. So depending on how the time factor, all that works out, you could argue that it's dangerous. And this isn't even including like the health risks of being near some of these active devices, which they call Havana syndrome and stuff like that. But just from a time perspective, like you might go in one of these crafts and come out in the future, or in the far future. That would be the real scary thing, is you come out and you're 100 years later and everybody you knew doesn't exist anymore. So that's the real implications from the physics perspective of what we'd be dealing with these kind of faster than light or warp effects happening.
So just to finish up, what do you think is going to happen with the Trump administration? Do you think they're going to kind of like fast track the release of these suppressed technologies through Doge, through Elon Musk?
Good question. I'd say probably not. I would guess like the world's not black and white. So the people hiding this aren't evil. So what are the motivations of the people hiding this? They probably think we're going to destroy ourselves. They probably also realize that this technology, we're not really ready for it, that it will change everything about our civilization immediately, including our socioeconomic way of life. And what even is our civilization without capitalism? And we were talking about free energy and we're talking about transmutation of elements. So how does government function if everybody has a free energy device or if everybody has a replicator in Star Trek? So I don't see, and Trump was president once before as well. I don't see that level of catastrophic disclosure happening. And I don't see them ever admitting to the black operation that was conducted like MH370 or similar operations that they've done, because it sows doubt and it undermines the public trust in the government. And that's, I think, the thing the government cares about the most, is that they want people to trust them. And that's what those videos do and hurt them the most. And I think that's why they can't allow those videos to ever go mainstream. But I do hope it happens. And I think that we're reaching a point where the technology in the public sector is getting powerful enough, especially with AI, where it's becoming impossible to hide, where people are able to do smaller experiments that prove these effects, that are asking the questions about experiments that have already been proven, like the Casimir effect and Ehrenhoff-Bohm effect, where in the near future it'll become undeniable that some of these effects that exist. And that's probably part of the reason why we're on this slow drip disclosure process right now, where they're trying to get us comfortable with the idea of aliens and advanced technology existing beyond our current paradigm.
So where do people go, Ashton, to get in touch with you if they want to message you or converse with you?
Yeah, and thank you very much for having me on this podcast. It's been a good discussion. You guys, the best ways to follow me are on Twitter and our X, I guess it's called now, and on YouTube. It's @JustXAshton. I'm also available on TikTok and on Instagram. I have a Hard Truths podcast myself as well that you guys can come and check out. It has some pretty awesome guests talking about the physics, talking about UFOs, and then digging into the origin of aliens as well, which is always fun.
Okay, great. Well, wonderful to have you, and look forward to talking in the future.
You too. Thank you.
You have been listening to Exopolitics today with Dr. Michael Salla. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Join or start a conversation in the comments. Take the time to explore the vast library of best-selling books, webinars, and podcasts by Dr. Salla. Visit exopoliticstoday.com.